to join you all and to be on stage with some excellent tech leaders, CIOs, CTOs, with what we had back there, a lovely contextual piece from Alex on not just the role of the CIO, of course, but the complexity, the increasing complexity of what it means and looks like to be in this digital business and industry. And the CIO really is at the heart of that complexity. Now, we had brief introductions on the screen behind us, but to introduce them more fully, Ian Golding of APEM Group, an environmental services group, Ian Cohen of Acacium Group, a global digital healthcare services provider, Colin of Gamma, which probably needs no introduction, and Paul Coby of Persimmon, the British householder group. Now, before I jump into the panel and questions, I have given them, or served them, a bit of a disservice. I can think of few other people in the country at the moment who can talk about the role of the CIO as these gentlemen here can. Between them, they've been CIOs, tech leaders of a host of globally recognized brands. The Natural History Museum, the RNLI for Ian, Associated Newspapers, the Financial Times, Addison Lee for Ian Cohen, Colin, BT and OpenReach across multiple business units, and Paul Coby, British Airways, John Lewis, to name a few. So very, very privileged to be on stage with you. Alex mentioned in particular the skills necessary for the CIO and for members of the audience who are looking to become CIOs and of course working with them too, that importance of maximising the potential of those individuals and of the CIO. So let's start with skills then. Ian, I'll come to you first given you're right next to me. Mm-hmm. What is this one skill that a CIO needs to succeed and how have you yourself honed that?
Good question, particularly in recent years. Given all the changes, I would say we probably had to become innovation officers of some kind. And the reason I say that is because we have to draw on so many new and emerging technologies and make so many things work across our organizations, build value streams across what might be very traditionally run organizations that doesn't really work anymore, and finding the kind of the North Star or the new products or new services that are basically created from the rich tapestry of all the different services and solutions that underlie all of those things.
Interestingly, also Ian is interim CIO, so well known for jumping in, jumping out, parachuting in, parachuting out. Does that interim nature of the CIO role change the skills that you need to employ?
It's been very interesting for me because my first interim role that you mentioned was the RNLI, and they have a very, very clear purpose of, I'm sure you all know, preventing people from drowning, saving lives. So when you have a very, very clear North Star, you have a very singular focus on what it is you want to do, where you want to spend your money, and the sort of outcomes you want, and using data in the way that Alex was describing. So over many interim roles, I've been sent in usually with one or two straightforward tech-type problems to solve, but actually what the organisation really wants to use is tech in a particular way in a digital world to be able to transform what they do over time. So it's actually been a bit of a gift for me to be able to be very curious and to probably stir the pot quite significantly, help those organisations change away from the traditional structures that they've had.
Excellent. You've used a great word there, curiosity.
Yeah.
Being curious seems to be the one big skill that every exec needs, let alone CIO. Ian, yourself.
So I think, first of all, I think it's a great question to ask. And the thing that always strikes me is CIO is a business technology leadership role. And very often we focus on the business alignment bit or the technology bit. The most important part is the leadership part for me. And I think there is a common characteristic in every leadership role that is a characteristic of the CIO role, which is this idea of bringing simplicity to an area of complexity. Every leader out there, whether they're an extrovert leader or whether they're an introvert or whatever kind of leader they are, invariably take a complex situation and make it simple. If you're a general in warfare, if you're a technologist in technology, by the way, technology can often be like warfare. So I think this idea of taking something complicated and making it simple so that people can follow you, because to the comment earlier, a leader is nothing without their followers, is super, super important to the CIO. And it's never been more important than it is now, with all of the complexity in the technology landscape, all of the things that your CEOs and your business colleagues are talking about. Unpacking that complexity and making it simple is the number one skill for the CIO, I would say.
Interesting. And interestingly, also, Ian, your CIO position has evolved somewhat to include AI, generative AI, as part of the formal responsibility, which I can think of no better thing to simplify as a complexity.
So, yes, is the answer. I kind of have responsibility for M&A and AI in the role that I hold. But if you want to ask me why I hold that role because I put my arms around it. I decided it was so important to the business and so important to the company that I operate in. Why would I want anybody else to lead on that topic? And I think, we'll talk about roles and structures and whatever. There will be chief AI officers out there. They will last slightly less than the chief digital officer, I would suggest, maybe. But the question is, why would you, if you are an aspiring technology leader and you want to grasp the things that are going to fundamentally change your business, why wouldn't you be throwing your hat in the ring to the AI agenda?
Interesting. Thanks, Ian. Colin, we'll come to you next.
I would say what I think about is really business acumen and understanding. And what I mean by that is many technologists move up in CIO roles because of their technology expertise. But actually, to be successful, it's about understanding the business. And quite often what I find is that many technology-related projects go wrong because the technology teams don't understand the business, or the business teams don't understand technology. It's like two different languages being spoken. And if as a CIO, you can really invest time in understanding the business problems and helping colleagues in the business to understand the challenges of technology, and technologists understand the challenges of the business. If you can get those people working together, break down that language barrier, then you can be hugely successful. So I invest as much of my time as possible out there in the business, using all the solutions, meeting lots of customers. Delighted to meet lots of customers today, because if I can understand that and help my brilliant technology team understand that as well, we will build better solutions.
Excellent. So you've got a bit of communication, comprehension, innovation and curiosity. Paul, close off this first question. What's your main skill that a successful CIO exhibits, and how have you honed it?
Well, I think it's being a conductor. And this came to me, after really enjoying that Leonard Bernstein film Maestro, with some fantastic performances, and then listening, to those performances. So I think leading IT function is as scary as leading an orchestra, because, you've got timpani, you've got strings, you've got woodwind over there in different parts of the orchestra, and we've got networks, and we've got delivery, and we've got maintenance, and we've got the GAI guys and the data guys. It's about conducting all of that. I think it's also, if you're in orchestra performance, you've got soloists, some of whom may or may not be temperamental, but they are key to the overall performance. And you've also got a score, so that's probably your ERP or your HR system or your cloud platforms. And that's a kind of given. But if you think about it, the way the conductor brings all of those elements together, way they deliver that score, whether Beethoven 9 can be delivered fantastically well when all the bits come together, and the soloists are there, and the whole orchestra is playing in time and in sync, and it can be a right awful mess and discordant and terrible. So it just came to me, Peter, that it is a bit like trying to conduct an orchestra and how you bring it together, and that's the kind of metaphor that I really like in terms of how you cope with all these changes.
I think it's a brilliant segue into the main meat of the panel, really, which is exactly what the CIO exhibits and how you could curate your optimal team in that structure. And let's take that metaphor of the conductor. I love that, Paul. Thank you very much. And open up to the panel now about how you yourselves have created those optimal team structures based on the skills you exhibit and the skills you're looking for.
Phrase digital discord springs to mind. What we want to avoid when people are maybe singing or playing their piece, but not at the right time or not in the right context. So how does that happen? I mean, I think it doesn't happen very readily in the very, very traditional organisation structures that we've seen. I mean, I think of an extreme example where you have an HR and a finance and a technology and a something or other business partner, and so you have teams flanked by so many people to apparently sort of bring all these ingredients together. That doesn't really work. You just end up with a bloated organisation. But I mean, we've worked in a PE organisation back many times, and they tend to be very good at finding the North Star, because it's about finding the value for something in a relatively short time frame. I think that really, really focuses people on what a product or a service is, and the more people can coalesce around something, a value stream or a product, something that's very clearly defined, I think that can be incredibly helpful. So for me, in an interim role, I'll often go in an organisation, inquire, well, where's my budget for all these grand plans that we'd like to come up with? And I kind of realised that my best response to that after one or two blank looks is to say, well, then I assume that the whole of the organisation and all of the budgets across all of the teams are within reach. It's just a question of finding good ideas, getting people behind those good ideas. They may be smaller or bigger ideas, but getting a coalition of people. I mean, actually, I literally don't look at organisations, organisation charts these days. It does matter that people know which teams they're in and they know when they're going to work and how they're managed. And the foundational sort of, let's say, waterfall or stable infrastructure is really important too. But on top of that, it's actually about creating something that everyone can get behind, or the right groups of people can get behind. And I kind of think then organisation models kind of fall away to be secondary to what it is that people are trying to achieve at some point.
I mean, I've had all sorts of different sorts of organisations and made some bad mistakes in having too many direct reports and setting up things that follow fashion. So I've reverted to keeping it very simple in terms of let's have a design, a build, and an operate function. And whether that's in the cloud or whether that's in-house, whether that's using brand new technologies or managing legacy technologies, I've found that the organisations understands that, and most importantly, the business kind of gets that. And you can then play the tunes on that.
I agree 100%. I am frustrated when I see organisations, for all the right reasons, building and publicising technology teams inside their organisational structures, because ultimately the people you are working with, your business colleagues, the customers you serve, whoever, they actually don't really care about the structure. The structure is of no interest to them whatsoever.
Yeah, spot on.
They want to know where to go to get something done. If I've got a good idea, where do I go? If I want to fix something, where do I go? If it's broken, what do I do? If I want to build something, where do I go? So having a simple approach to your organisation, my organisations have always been actually very similar to Paul's. I tend to go with 4 things. Somewhere to go where you work out the direction of stuff. Am I doing the right thing? Am I aligned? Some people call it architecture, some people call it design. A place to go where I manage stuff, services, projects, programs, products. A place where I build stuff, where I execute stuff, a place where stuff gets delivered. And that's simple. You can have conversations with your colleagues about this is where you go to solve your problems. They don't want to hear a debate between the application development team and the platform development team and the delivery services team about who got it wrong or whose fault it is. No interest whatsoever. So make the structure simple and seamless for the type of engagement you want inside your company, I would suggest.
I think that's really interesting. It's also interesting, ask 4 CXOs and you get 4 different answers. The thing I would reflect on is what I find incredibly important is to bring technology close to the business. And there's two mechanisms that I use to do that. Whatever your structure, I always ask my direct reports to dual report and act as the CIO for a particular part of the business, so that they grow those skills, learn about that business, and they wake up every morning not worrying about their tech team, but also worrying about the business that they're serving. So bring technology closer to the business. And also then when it comes to actually building solutions, the question I always ask, I ask both technology and business colleagues, have you used it? Have you seen it? You know, if you're building a website, can you just log on and show me? And really making sure that people aren't just using slides and talking about stuff, but they're actually close to the solutions and really in the detail and talking to each other about it.
Have each of those strategies stood the test of time across your careers? Or of late, as we discussed previously, the complexity of the industry now, have you had to refine them in some way? And if so, how and why?
I mean, it's very much reverting to where I started from, you know, for exactly the reasons that, you know, Ian articulated so well. You know, but I think the core point to build on it, which is you said, is, you know, are you getting access into the business? You know, are you part of the business? You know, you're the IT function of a business. That's the only and simple reason why you're there. So I always use as the acid test, you know, am I and is my team getting invited to the customer strategy day, the operations strategy day, the finance strategy day? Because if they are, the business has got it. They're understanding that digital tech is fundamental to everything they do, and they're bringing people in, and you're part of that discussion.
And you've hit the nail on the head. Are you part of? Because for too many years, there's the IT function, there's the business function. We're IT, they're the business. And we've spoken for decades about IT and business alignment. And by definition, when you talk about alignment, you actually reinforce separation. You know, you make things seem distant. So when you build organizations and you design organizations, you're designing for the business. You are the business. So it's inconceivable that the people who are building things in a vacuum. They're building them with their business colleagues. So if I've seen one tweak to organizational design, it's definitely about this engagement and being closer to the edge of the network. And it's also very much about partnering. Not business partnering in the HR sense, but partnering sitting next to the person you are working with, deep understanding of the outcome you're trying to achieve. That's tweaked the model.
Would you call that a sort of democratization of the digital output or delivery of the teams, or are we thinking about something else?
Possibly, but you know how much I hate the word democratization. I don't think it's about. We can get hung up on terms. You know, I like to talk about design. So I'll give you an example. I like to talk about design rather than architecture, and I don't have architectural teams. The reason is architecture comes across to certain people as slightly sterile, a bit blueprint, a bit techie. Design comes across as a conversation. I'd like that wall blue. Can I have my car? Part of our job is to facilitate the conversations that will drive the outcomes. And the fastest way to do that is to change the vocabulary. So you get closer to people and you have conversations. You don't talk about frameworks. You talk about outcomes. You don't talk about process maps. You talk about designs. If you change that, and that's not changing structure, that's just tweaking the narrative inside your structure.
I want to come now to the skills then for the audience. So we've discussed that structural piece. We've had some lovely anecdotes. What then does that mean for the teams you're curating, whether they are siloed or not, depending on your outcomes? Ian, why do you take that one?
Well, so I think we're now really talking about how people work together much better across the organisation. By the way, a nice silver lining side effect to what you're describing, Ian, is that we don't hear so much about shadow IT when people are actually working more together, because it just becomes evident what people should or shouldn't do. So I see a lot of tech or digital teams now actually working genuinely across the entire organisation. And sometimes actually that brings people that have brilliant product ideas or designs for future products much closer to the technology teams. I really, really like that we're moving away from this demarcation. We've talked for years about value streams, but with all the different component parts that we have to deal with, you can't have the cyber and the architecture teams and all these different teams working their different camps, and then you have this handoffs with 10 different teams. It's all really important. That all has to work together. I think we're actually bringing people together to work much more closely away from this demarcation we've seen.
And I think, Peter, one of the things that has changed over my time as being CIO in different businesses is that both the understanding of the business in how to use technology is much, much better. So modern executives need to know about technology, and they do, and they have views on it. It's no longer the preserve of the experts, which was always a bad idea. I think also the tools, the fact that it sort of started with rules-based engines in terms of software. We've now got Power BI, which puts enormous power and has been absolutely transformational for my existing business in terms of just understanding and using data. So you don't need interpreters to do that. Generative AI, the way Copilot is being used, the way other sorts of tools are putting this enormous amount of power and ability in the hands of our colleagues. And I think that's something that, we've got to go with and manage, because if you don't, you're holding your business back. But I think that's a real qualitative change from, the IT looked after this and you can't touch it because it's our IT. It's not, we all know it's not like that now. You've got to enable the business.
Yeah. I think the skill that I look for today are the people that can find the sweet spot between a perfect architecture, solving a business problem, the money available and the time available. And you have to find the sweet spot. What is the most that you can do to enable the business within the budget set by the CFO, with the technology constraints that you have, and not be too purist about your architecture. And what I find is, when I find the people that can do that, they are the real golden nuggets that help you unlock a technology strategy.
Yeah, but interestingly, we saw that bar chart in Alex's opening segment around the different priorities that CEOs have. And it did strike me that there were a couple that were perhaps surprising. Not the growth per se, but certainly the delivery of product and efficiency, perhaps, which, as a CIO, one of your main responsibilities, in your point, is simplifying the complex. How do you translate what the demands of the CEO is at the moment with the teams that you have and what you're able to do with them?
I think that, there is no substitute for a great relationship with your CEO. And I've been super fortunate to work with some amazing CEOs in my career. But if you can build that relationship there are certain relationships as a CIO that people tend to think, oh, well, I'll do this. I'm going to go and work across the COO network because that's where my stakeholder community lives. Or I'm going to focus on the CFO because that's where my budget lives. The sad reality of life is you have to focus on all of them.
Yes.
You have to be, that trusted voice in all of those conversations. And you have to build teams that have the ability to execute on that trust. Because, to your point, one of the measures I have for my leadership team is when executives stop calling me, because I do very little. I know very little as well. My teams know way more than I do. They are populated by experts in their field. When the stakeholder community, when my business colleagues are calling members of my team, asking questions, and have the same depth of relationship that I have, then you know that talent, structure, engagement piece is working properly.
And the best way to do that is go and ask them.
Yeah.
And actually talk to them. And there will be different things. And, you know, you build trust in different ways. So, you know, it may be, you know, a new HR, you know, platform or improving that. Or it may just, you know, please can you make my flipping iPad work properly, guys? The current job, you know, one of our big pain points is connectivity at 250 building sites, construction sites around the country, which are in difficult to access sort of places. Gamma pricking their ears up at this point, I'm sure. But, you know, fixing that was unlocked, as Ian said, trust. And then when you've got that, then it's about building on that. What do you need next? How do we use this once you've proved that? But that's going to be different with different people. And as you said, you know, the leadership team is fundamental to that.
It's interesting hearing those two answers, because what I often find is that the CEO is completely clear what they want. The complexity isn't there. The complexity is that your peers around the leadership team have all heard a different thing. Yeah. And actually what you have to do is go back to, well, what are we actually trying to get to? And understanding where are the disconnects that mean people have taken a different perspective on the clear direction has been. So I think joining things up and holding on to that clear direction is really important as well.
There's no substitute, as Paul said, for understanding, you know, what it is that you're actually doing, like at grassroots, what's actually going on out in the field, and that's a great way of building relationships with, you know, perhaps a bit ground up with those other executive peers. And of course, the chief exec relationship is a very important one, because while they can't get into the noise and detail of everyone's directed, if we call it that, they do corral the exec team around something, and they probably have a very clear idea of exactly where they want to go, and they may be thinking about different things, investor share prices, all sorts of different things for 3 years in the future. So yeah, I mean, it's how it all comes together as the exec team and the cohesive vision, isn't it?
I wonder if you've given any thought to what you'd be doing or thinking about or prioritising if you were not in the positions you are today. You are perhaps 2, 3, 4 levels below, and thinking about what it takes to become the next CIO in an increasingly democratized word, sorry to use the word Ian, but digital word, AI focused and the like. Would you do anything particularly different? I'm just thinking about what the audience can take from you in terms of what they should think about from this afternoon onwards.
I find that question incredibly difficult, because I think the routes that people take are people specific. The route that I took isn't going to be the route that everybody else takes. The thing that still lives with me now, and we've mentioned the word, and it was there when I was a systems programmer, it was there when I was a project manager, it was there when I was doing product before it was called product, is I'm slightly weird. I have this insane curiosity about stuff. And it's not just technology stuff, it's all kinds. I'm curious about music, I'm curious about art. I don't see that I leave that curiosity at home. And so for me, it's that curiosity that continually asks me, well, what's next? And that, you know, get immersed in whatever you are curious about. Be passionate about it, and that will give you the stepping stones you need.
I love that, and I would build on it very slightly, which is what I love, what I always encourage people to do. Is the question to ask of your boss is, how can I help? What other problem can I solve for you? And in that way, that curiosity, but also solving a business problem, what I find then is that that's always my advice to people. Ask how you can help and do more, and then do that, and good things happen.
Perhaps building on that, somebody once said that to me that, you know, decide what you think your next role you want to be, and actually start being that. Start behaving like that, and help your boss in that way.
There is also no such thing as a generic type of, let's say, CIO in this context. And I've been fortunate to work with some brilliant tech leaders who have actually gone on, I think I've sort of played a bit of a role in mentoring them as then they've taken on their first CIO roles. And their skill sets have been absolutely completely different. And two organisations as a go, a sustainability client sustainability lifecycle expert became Anthesis's chief digital officer because he was so good at understanding what the net zero, sustainability, digital tools could be from a product management perspective. So he is that person, and I'm pretty sure all the people in this room that aspire to be in leadership roles will all have very different skills. So I think with an obsession with the outcomes is probably going to take people down a good path, whatever works for them.
Excellent. And just a final question for each of you before we close off the panel and allow the rest of the event to continue. We touched at the beginning the skills you think are core for a successful CIO. Are there any skills that each of you do not have that you're looking to acquire, either this year or in the near future, and why?
Understanding the next new technology. But it goes to the point that several of you, Colin, it's about being curious. You know, it's always being excited about digital tech, you know, because it is constantly changing, unlike some other professions, you know, where, you know, they're pretty static. It's so exciting because you don't know what the next challenge is, so being open to that's really important.
Yeah, I would echo that. I'm a huge geek. I spend so much time playing with future technologies, looking to understand them, and I think that's super important as a CIO or a CTO. You've got to be learning all of the time about what might come next.
Yeah, 100% agree. It used to be, learn the language of the business, don't speak about technology. The way you get on in the boardroom is the language of the business. Now, the geeks are on the rise. It is cool to know tech. Doesn't mean you don't know business, it's cool to know business as well, but you don't push the tech to the background anymore. Or, you know, it can live in the foreground.
Nothing really to add other than I think it could be incredibly exhausting because everything is changing more quickly than ever before, but actually because of the roles and the position that we are all in, and with our combined curiosity, it's actually an exhilarating time to be on the front foot for everything that's evolving now.
Fantastic. Well, I've written down 4 C's: communication, comprehension, curiosity, and conducting, which is, I wasn't expecting to write that one down for, but I think that's, and it's sort of with 4 speakers on the panel, I think that echoes and reflects quite nicely, not just the amount of stuff that you will have to do, but actually when you simplify and boil it down into its constituent parts, it really can be as simple as those 4 C's. But thank you very much for joining us at GX Summit.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you.